Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're here to talk about seasonal fall cooking. My name is Reyna Franco. I am a registered dietitian nutritionist at Ogilvy, and I'm also a certified personal trainer. And we're going to get started with today's cooking seminar. So the number one thing I would love for everybody to get out of this today is to shop seasonally. So what does that mean? It means that for every season, we have summer, fall, winter, spring. There are different crops that are grown and that are produced during those seasons. So why is that important? Why do we want to eat seasonally? Well, first of all, the food tastes better. When you get something that is freshly picked, that's ripe and delicious, right from the vine, from the tree, from the ground, it just tastes delicious. That's the most wonderful food that you could enjoy. So another great thing is when we eat seasonally, quite often, when we don't eat seasonally, the food is then traveled from somewhere else and it's not even ripened yet. And it has to ripen during the traveling process. So it never becomes as delicious as seasonally picked produce. Um, Another thing is the nutrition is better. What do I mean by that? Is when you eat seasonally and locally, when it's freshly picked, all the nutrients within that food are there. So when you don't eat seasonally and you eat something that's, from another time of the season that's been stored or from another part of the country, that produce has to travel. And during that traveling process, the nutrients are oxidized. So what that means, when nutrients are oxidized, you lose a lot of the nutrients. Not that it's not healthy, and not that you shouldn't be eating food that has been traveling when you don't have that food available. Still have it. Just know that when you have produce that's seasonal and also local, it's going to taste better and it's going to be more nutritious. The other thing is cost. Um, So when something is in season, there's more of that product. So when there's greater supply, that means the price is going to be lower. When the supply is lower and you have a greater demand, the price goes up. So again, consider seasonality for the price. And something else that we really need to think about is the environment. I mentioned a couple times shipping and traveling. So if we want produce that's not in season, usually it's from maybe the West Coast or another country. And in order to get here, it has to travel. Think of all the fuel that needs to be used to get that produce here to New York or New Jersey, Connecticut, wherever you live. It really impacts the environment greatly. And one of my last reasons here is, when we shop seasonally, think about shopping locally too. Go to the local farmers market. I really enjoy it. I love seeing what the farmers have brought in, what they've been producing, and you're supporting our local farms. If you don't have a farmers market, you might think about community supported agriculture. That's CSA. So what that is usually a farm or a group of farms get together and they bring produce down, and you buy that produce in advance. You actually pay the farms for the produce and you get a huge box, and you sometimes get to even meet the farmers, talk about the produce that they're bringing in, but it's always something locally grown and seasonal. And as I said, supporting our local economy, supporting our farmers who greatly need it, is something we should all be doing. So here we see a chart of the foods that are in season during the fall. And there are a good number of them. There's a lot of them. So, this is all about seasonal cooking. I'm only going to focus on a couple of them that are foods that we think about often when we think about fall and the cooking. But there are, take a look at this chart. You see everything from winter squashes to broccoli, leeks, pomegranates even. Obviously, we don't grow them here in New York. Those do have to be shipped, but they're local somewhere. I guess you probably could grow them in New York. Anyway, going on, we have pears and cauliflower, pumpkin, mushrooms. So these are all delicious foods that we can incorporate into our meals. So now I'm going to talk about cooking seasonally. Now, this is the fun part. So a very common food we think about in the fall is winter squash. And there are so many different types of winter squash. Now, the nutrition, the reason why we might want to eat it, because it's very nutritious. They have high levels of alpha carotene and beta carotene. These are phytonutrients. Phyto means plant. So nutrients from the plant that convert to vitamin A. Vitamin A is a very potent antioxidant. Winter squash also has a lot of vitamin C, it has magnesium, it has potassium. It's a great source of fiber. And as we know, fiber is really good for reducing our risk of cholesterol and diabetes and heart disease. Winter squash is full of different antioxidants and has anti-inflammatory compounds. So anti-inflammatory, reduce inflammation. Again, if we want to focus on an anti-inflammatory way of eating, and when we reduce inflammation, we improve our heart health. We may even reduce pain that we have by reducing inflammation. It's good for our brain. And winter squash also contains polysaccharides. These may help regulate and also possibly control blood sugar. So enjoy these high fiber foods. And here's a picture of just a few different winter squashes. We have acorn squash, amber cup squash, delicata squash, spaghetti squash, butternut squash, and buttercup squash in this picture. I've been eating a lot of delicata squash lately. It's really delicious. And another really fun one is spaghetti squash. So when you cook that, you could make what looks like spaghetti out of it. So it's a spaghetti substitute. Now, when you want to purchase winter squash, you need to inspect the actual food. Make sure it's firm, make sure it feels heavy for its size, and you want the outside to be kind of dull and definitely hard. If you find a squash that has a soft spots or looks like it's decaying, don't select it. So as we know, the squash is hard, it should be hard, and it's not easy to puncture. Make sure you have a really sharp knife in order to cut it. So I actually had to go out and buy a super sharp knife in order to cut my squash. Squash can be stored for 1 to 6 months. And in order to do that, you want to keep it in a cool, dry place away from the light. And the best storage temperature is between 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And let's say you do open it up, make sure if it's raw, you want to wrap it up and put it in the refrigerator. It can stay there for 2 to 3 days before it goes bad. You can also freeze squash. So, of course, what you could do is you could just peel it, cut it into pieces, and put it into the freezer. Once you cook the squash, it can be stored in the refrigerator in an airtight container, and it'll be fresh for up to 5 days in the refrigerator. Now, there are some really simple, easy ways of cooking squash. So all you need to do is you cut it in half lengthwise, you scoop out the seeds, you put it face down or the cut side down on a parchment lined baking sheet. And what you want to do is preheat the oven to 400 degrees. Once it's hot, put the squash into the oven, and you need to cook it for about 45 minutes. You might want to test it every now and then, put a knife in there and make sure that the knife could be easily inserted into the flesh. Then you will scoop out the flesh. What you could do is you could mash it in a bowl and throw some cinnamon in it, and then right there you have a little appetizer. You could also use mashed or pureed winter squash as part of a casserole. And believe it or not, it could be used as an egg replacer in baked goods. Another nice thing I like to do is, just keep the cubes, cube it, and throw it into salads. Maybe I'll use it in soups or stews, or one thing I love to make is vegetarian chili and putting the squash in there. Really very delicious. Another thing you could do with the cubes is you could just toss them with tamari, ginger, and pumpkin seeds and have a really lovely side dish. Now, next, we have a whole bunch of different recipes, and I am not going to read through them. I'm just going to quickly go over them so you have some ideas of what we have. And they're easy, they're healthy. The first one is a butternut squash soup. And what I try to do with these recipes, I try to minimize the number of ingredients and steps. So this one is very simple. It just has 5 ingredients. It has the squash, it has vegetable broth, an onion, nutmeg, and just a little sea salt and black pepper. And you could skip the sea salt if you have high blood pressure, diabetes, and you're sticking to a low sodium diet. You could also add other spices to it if you like. But again, this is butternut squash soup, simple, delicious, and healthy. The next recipe is a stuffed butternut squash. And here, this is one that's a little bit different because quite often we'll stuff our squash with rice and more savory foods. This one is a little sweet because we're stuffing it with apples. There's some onion, a little apple juice concentrate, pecan pieces, cinnamon, and cinnamon. So here it's a different type of flavor uh, than your typical stuffed squash. It's really delicious. And of course, apples are another seasonal fruit. Following that is a stuffed acorn squash with what I usually think of when I stuff my squash. This one has rice and a lot of vegetables. It has peppers and onions and garlic, mushrooms, spinach, and then we add some beans to it for the protein. So this right here is a complete meal. So it's delicious and a meal right there. And then what do we always think about when we think of the fall? Pumpkin. So there are a lot of great recipes out there for pumpkin. I have one here for pumpkin soup. And years ago, I used to make my own pumpkin puree. I would get the pumpkin, I would roast it, and it was nice. It was a lot of work. But what I found is that the canned pumpkin puree is an easy shortcut. So I have to say, that's what I'm doing these days because I don't have time. So I will use canned pumpkin puree. And that's all it is. It's just 100% pumpkin. So in this pumpkin soup, this is also another meal because it has the pumpkin, onion, garlic, vegetable broth, bunch of seasonings, and red lentils. So the red lentils give it the protein. So enjoy this pumpkin soup. What I probably would do is have a salad on the side. And right there, I have my leafy greens. I have my pumpkin, which is also a starchy vegetable. I have my lentils, which is the protein. I have a perfect meal right there, a soup and a salad. Now I'm going to talk about some apple recipes. And it's really true how an apple a day keeps the doctor away. We hear that all the time. But there's a reason for that. Apples are very high in antioxidants, specifically quercetin, catechin, and chologenic. So these are very potent antioxidants that do um, increase your immune system. So enjoy your apples, especially this time of year. They're also very high in fiber, high in vitamin C, and high in potassium. So it's good for your immune system. It's good for reducing cholesterol, good for blood sugar control. So many wonderful reasons to enjoy apples, especially when they're in season. So here's a picture of a whole bunch of different apples. Everybody has their own favorite apple, or the ones, they like to cook the best or eat the best. My favorite is the Fuji apple. Now the next recipe is actually a sweet. It's a triple apple cake. And the ingredients in this are just all natural. There is no added sugar. Right? It's made of rolled oats, flaxseed meal, cinnamon, nutmeg, baking powder, baking soda, apples, applesauce, dried apple rings. Delicious. So if you're looking for something healthy and sweet and yummy, I highly recommend trying out this recipe. Okay, triple apple cake. Another wonderful treat, and this would be a great snack, is baked apple chips. Only two ingredients, apples and cinnamon. That's it. All you need to do is you preheat your oven, you core the apples. You don't have to, but I suggest it. You don't really want to eat the seeds. Seeds in a large quantity can be toxic. If you have one by accident, it's okay. Um, but you're better off just coring the apples. You want to slice them as thin as possible. Then you place them on the baking sheet. You sprinkle them with cinnamon. You bake them for an hour. Then you turn them over. You bake them for another hour. And they get crispy and they're delicious. So they are just a fun snack for the whole family. The next recipe is apple overnight oats. So again, this would be great for the morning. It will also be a really delicious snack. And all it is, it's oats, apple, milk or plant-based milk, dates, and dates is what's going to make it sweet, walnuts, a little orange zest, and a little ground ginger. And all you need to do, it's so simple, is just combine all those ingredients together and you put it in the refrigerator, and you could let it sit for 8 hours or overnight. And the next day you have a delicious breakfast.